Namaste and welcome to another episode of the Bharatvaarta podcast. I'm Roshan Karyappa. Today we have Aniket Doegar, the co-founder and CEO of Haqdarshak, as our guest. Haqdarshak was founded in 2015 and uses tech to ensure last-mile delivery of social welfare schemes in India. Aniket has been featured in Forbes 30 under 30 for Asia and is an alum of SRCC and Stanford. Today we'll be talking to him about the challenges in last mile delivery of social schemes, how these welfare programs are designed, and how tech is helping improve the impact of some of these programs. Aniket, welcome to Bharatvaarta. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Roshan.
Aniket, lots to discuss, but let's do a 101 first, right? For lay people who are listening, could you give us a sense of how these social welfare schemes in India are designed? What are the larger objectives, and how do we measure impact of some of these schemes?
So, Roshan, I think social welfare schemes, one thing for us, all of us to understand is while it's delivered in a bureaucratic process in our constitution, largely schemes today are delivered from a political objective. So, schemes, as we are seeing today all across the country, and rightly so, the social welfare is the pillar on which in a way, I would say our democracy stands. Whether when you are fighting elections at a state level, gram panchayat level, national level, municipal corporations, governments are essentially putting forward their manifesto to the citizens. These manifestos essentially are government schemes and designs. Whether it is the Swachh Bharat campaign, whether it was the RT campaign, RTI, all of them lead to multiple government schemes. So the in a sense of that, the macro level, we have to understand that in whichever state you are or whoever is at the center, their thought process and thinking will really shape the kind of government schemes India has. So if you go back 50, 60, 70 years back and look at the kind of government schemes we had, they were linked to basic housing, green revolution, milk revolution, a lot of focus on farmers because that was the state of the economy and the focus. In the last 8 to 10 years, I would say the government scheme focus has completely transformed into a citizen delivery model because we are using data as a digital economy, as not only as India but also as a world economy. So whether it is directly getting the citizens access to multiple government schemes right at the center and then different states irrespective of the political parties, everyone has their different take on different social welfare programs related to multiple approaches. I mean, just to give also a sense to the listeners, we have, as per government mandated data under RBI, 11,200 government schemes. So they, at the state level, central level, corporation level, different segments, and these are end of the day, all of this, all of us, including all of us, are voters to the political parties, and their thinking and design is always linked to the fact that we need to, in our term, ensure maximum welfare happens to the citizens, and this is then done through the bureaucratic machinery.
Yeah, I guess at some level you can never divorce politics and policy, right? Because essentially, I mean, what you want is what the constituents want should shape up in some form of policy making and so on. Um, but again, right, I mean, just to push back and ask you another very simple 101, right? How do you design these schemes? I mean, it can't be that I can just as a political party, I mean, I just see something and I say, hey, you know what, there should be a scheme for X or Y or Z things, right? How does the budgeting happens, and how does this vary given India's federal structure, right? I mean, the central budgets, the state budgets, how is the roadmap made? And if you could take us through some of those nuances, that will be helpful.
Absolutely. So, largely the government scheme design is done basis the caste and economic census, which the government has access to. It was last done in 2011 and then has been done periodically, but not really made open in terms of the citizen data. But there are three, four key criteria for majority of the government schemes. It is your caste, it's your income, then whether you have any disability, and your domicile, where you live, right? Basis the geography, because that also determines the kind of profile you have. In very simple terms, the eligibility criteria works like a probability theorem. If and or conditions. If you belong to a certain caste and of an income or of a domicile, then you'll get a particular scheme. So how the structure is in a way set in our constitution. It sets from identity, which community you belong to, which part of the geography of India you belong to. Historically, have you been an oppressed class, caste? That really determines the schemes. Of late, there has been a massive, in the last 2, 3 decades, massive focus on income as well. As our incomes have gone up, the disparity has also increased. So people belonging to low income families, marginalized families, they are the ones who for whom the schemes are largely designed. And even if you look at the caste breakup of India, right, which is at the core of social welfare, we have 52% people today identified as OBC, creamy and non-creamy layer. Then we have another 26% split between SC and ST. So if you look at the core percentage, you're nearly talking about 78 to 80% people belonging to different castes as per different states center. So these are all people who come under different kind of government schemes, social security benefits. It is linked at the core to the documentation. So governments are essentially looking at their core voter IDs. What is the caste breakup? What is the profile breakup? What is the religious breakup in certain cases? What is the economic breakup? And then if I'm an MLA, MP, I put that ideally in a theoretical kind of sense, get that data up right to the decision makers, the executive, legislative body, put in the bills, put in the policies to ensure under a particular act can we ensure certain schemes can happen. Of course, as we know in our country, all of it culminates into the budget, the February March budget that is done, and then these recommendations go into the finance ministry. Of course, a lot of background work is done by the commission, by the ministry, the economic survey that is launched every year. But at the core of it is these 4 5 key parameters of profiling and identity: which caste you belong to, which income group you are in, what is your domicile, do you have any disability, and so on and so forth.
Right. When we talk about last mile delivery, right, for a nation that is as large and complex and as India, there could be a heck of a lot of challenges, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
the permutations and combinations of the three or four criteria that you mentioned will result in so many different, so many different sections that you have to serve, right? As someone who has seen some of these challenges firsthand, could you talk us through some of the last mile delivery challenges and how they can be kind of mitigated, maybe through better design?
So I think there are, for last mile delivery, we have to look at two very clear aspects. One is the digital piece that is moving very fast, and all of us are getting more and more digitally connected. Whether you look at innovations like UPI, or we are talking about 5G in certain areas now, and I mean people have still not got access to smartphones. So I think the last mile delivery has to be looked at as technology enabled, but technology is not the end solution. Technology needs to be looked at as an assisted platform for last mile. How can people use technology to get better access to last mile? So, for me, especially in the work that I've done and what I've seen across, I think getting community champions to work on different solutions is a much better way of inclusion. Because, I mean, just by pure numbers, we still have half of the country not linked to active smartphone access. We do not have great internet access to these citizens. Majority of the top 30-40% of the smartphone users are the ones which are driving 90% of transactions, whether it is UPI, whether it is edtech, fintech, all the other segments that we are looking at. About 200 to 250 million people in this country essentially are driving the entire unicorn growth by actually being active users, active payers, which means in a country of 1.4 billion people, you still have 1.2 billion people who are to be meaningfully connected. They might be smartphone users, but they're not actively using it. In that, with that background, in our country, the last mile access has to be to empower community champions, whether it is a political worker, grassroots worker, social worker, gram panchayat head, or any of these community champions. Can we get them access to this information, access to this social security services platform, and then they are the ones who are reaching out to the community. So this assisted tech help is really the way of ensuring, in a country as diverse and as the size of India, to ensure last mile delivery, last mile inclusion. Otherwise, we can create these large companies with great valuations, but it'll be very difficult to kind of actually reach the absolute last.
But don't you think that, I completely understand your point. I think we have to empower communities, and you need to have certain people step up and so on, right? But the flip side of that is also that, something like direct benefit transfer, right, where someone does not have to depend on anyone as such, would get a little bit staggered, right? I mean, it would get kind of blocked in some sense, because if I have to go to, let's say, the panchayat head, or the committee member or ward member or whatever, for things to happen, while I understand the point of assistance, right, it may also become a point of like a blocker, as such, right? I mean, how do you see that balance out?
So I think we need to look at a situation which is not either or but and. So I think it needs to be DBT and last mile, because absolutely the way forward in the mid to long term is direct benefit transfer, as much as less as possible of human touch. That's actually weeded out a lot of grassroots level corruption. which we have historically seen in India, in other countries also. But the fact is that pure digital is also leads to exclusion. So we worked with, to give you an example, we worked with an organization which works with old people in getting people access to old age pension, and these are people who are destitute, poor, in remote villages in different states. Now I have to, as a citizen, if I'm above 60, above 65, if I have to get access to old age pension, which is actually about anywhere between 800 to 2,000 rupees a month of benefit, I have to prove after 3 to 5 years I'm digitally active. Otherwise, I'm marked dead in the system, right? I have to show some physical or digital footprint. A lot of these citizens that we have worked in the past in different states with different partners, they also need to get their income certificate renewed or their certificates renewed. Whether, let's take another example of ration. Now, fantastic program. The country, almost 800
Yeah.
million people, 80 crore people in this country are getting free rations since the last 2 years, which is unheard of in any part of the world. I mean, the fact that we are able to sustain a country, 80 crore people, is absolutely fantastic. But there is a lot of exclusion there if you only think of it as a digital tool, because there will be people in our country who cannot get their biometric done, who maybe cannot walk to a PDS shop, or who do not have their digitally Aadhaar linked to their phone number, because I'm changing my phone number. I'm a migrant labor. So there is that segment of 20, 30, 40% exclusion cases where you need last mile help, somebody guiding them to, okay, this is where you go to a Russian shop. This is how you get your biometric done. I mean, we have to, when we change our phone number, sometimes do PAN linking, Aadhaar linking, and all those things on fintech. Imagine someone who's a construction worker, that number might be decreasing. It might be have been in 10 years, 15 years back, 70, 80% exclusive. Today, it might be just 30, 40. But in sheer number, the 30% of 80 crore is still 24, 25 crore people, which is the size of Indonesia,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, we still need that last mile assistance. One is just to ensure inclusion happens. And second, also because like every service, like we use food delivery, cab delivery, all those hailing services, we also need quality service. Everyone, even if somebody who is digitally savvy in a rural area and they want social security, they probably can do it themselves. But if given an option of last mile, they potentially might want to take up for a small fee a last mile service purely because it's convenient, just how we use urban services. So it's digital literacy access, plus also the fact that last mile service along with other digital innovations can also lead to better convenience services, quality services.
Right. Last couple of years has been really challenging, right? COVID has kind of wrecked livelihoods, and you just mentioned, right, 80 crore people have received some sort of welfare and stuff, rations and so on, right? Last year, I think the year before, I think there was a lot of debate on how some of this welfare would be delivered, right? I mean, some of the more developed
Yeah.
countries decided to give like a one-time cash transfer, and if I look back over the last couple of years, I think our method of sort of giving very targeted welfare and at certain points, right, strategically, has kind of paid off. Being someone who is connected to the ground, who has traveled fairly widely throughout the country and so on, how have you seen the COVID welfare, really impact people?
So I think, I mean, like you said, the challenge of COVID has been unprecedented. So I mean, not only to Indian government, but I would say across the globe, whatever the governments have been able to do in certain cases, like with limited resources, it's commendable, because I think it's easy to criticize, and of course there can be a lot more done in every situation. But I would still say, especially for a country like ours, which doesn't have the kind of resources like the West has, and doesn't have such a big population, we've been able to really do, like you said, targeted benefits. I think programs like Ration, what the government has done apart from targeted benefits is really identify two or three key things that people would need right now. One, first is food, which is your basic survival, right? So I think ration being free has been an absolute. There is no targeting. Anyone who falls under that category can get ration. The One Nation One Ration Card program is fantastic, because we've been able to now get, if even if I am in Himachal, for example, and I'm migrating to Delhi for work, I can still go to a ration shop and get my ration, which is again fantastic. The second big piece is health, and we have seen that Ayushman Bharat, the scheme on subsidized medicines, and all these things at the state and central level have done well. Where I think we could do much better, even with targeted programs, and I think where there will be a lot more work to do, as we need to bring back the economy back to pre-pandemic levels and more as our aspirations are. One is in housing,
Mm.
because I think there is a massive gap right now, especially in urban areas, as we see urban poor, rural poor. And there are schemes, PM Awas Yojana, we have the urban schemes also, but I think, like you said, that is linked to livelihoods. Even if I get schemes from the government, I still need much more livelihoods. And at the core of livelihoods are our MSMEs, our micro and small medium enterprises, not the large corporate houses, but I'm talking about the 7 crore medium and small nano businesses, your retail shop, your thelewala, your vegetable vendors, street vendors, who really need a lot more support. The fact is, government by its own admission says that we can only cater to 15 to 16% of credit needs of this country. It is a fact.
Yeah.
We have a credit need of $20 trillion in the next 5 years that we will, and that's at a conservative estimate. So we need more people formalized. We need to get them credit quickly. And I think that's where, if we really want to see how we can really not only survive and but also thrive in the sense, like grow, that's where we will need a lot of government social security programs linked to the credit aspirations of people. But yeah, on the basic health, food, uh, these things, I think the government has done well. Of course, one other challenge that has come out very clearly is our federal structure. It's a pro and con both, right? Like, I think the pro being that it leads to more diversity. Different states have different needs. How a Tamil Nadu looks at schemes is very different to how a Jammu Kashmir looks at it, or a Northeast state looks at it, or a Ahmedabad or Gujarat looks at it, or Maharashtra looks at it. So it lends the localization flavor. The con can be that there is a lot of coordination required between center and state. So there are certain states who may not get along politically with center, and then you have a lot of clash. And then at the end of it, the citizens sometimes don't benefit. So I think that's the nature of democracy. And that's where I think we probably need more consensus building and going forward, a lot more work also.
Right. You mentioned a very interesting point, right? Which is, while we are enabling individuals, we also have to enable entrepreneurs and businesses. To that effect, I think the Mudra loans, or
Yes.
the GST, or the even the upcoming account aggregators framework, I think they're in a pilot phase right now. Right, all of these will sort of give the credit necessary, give the support necessary for these folks to sort of thrive, right? But looking at our ambitious $5 trillion economy goal, or maybe $10 trillion by whatever time, what are some of those two or three things that you would like to see in terms of social welfare?
So on the businesses side, to be very honest, I think, like you said, on the innovation side, we are probably the leader in the world now with UPI, with the account aggregator. We are talking about the open credit network for MSME. So I think there is no doubt that in terms of, we are truly the IT, not only the background office IT anymore. We are the kind of solution
Yeah.
focused really for the masses and open tech. But I think for us to really get people on it, the in the next 2 to 3 years, what we really need to do as an economy is formalize these businesses. By government's estimates, there are 7 crore micro and small businesses, right? Like your small chai
Yeah.
shop, your vegetable vendor, street vendor. That's an estimate, but not all of them are under the formalization system. We don't know how many, let's say in Delhi NCR or in a Bangalore or in a Mumbai, all these mega metro cities, including all the metro areas and suburb areas, how many real micro businesses on a daily business are there? Do they have Udyog Aadhaar? Do they have GST? Do they have a municipal corporation registration? Do they have a formal bank account with UPI? How many of them are paying unnecessary fee on a daily basis just to run their business? If we can really focus on identification and formalization, then the job of the ecosystem becomes easy, because government necessarily shouldn't do everything. Once we have this data and made available to the ecosystem, I think, without goes without saying, India is probably the fastest growing fintech universe in the world. So I think there are enough bright young people who can build on that, and then ensure interesting credit products or financial products, savings products, investment products for this layer. And the other thing is that micro businesses is a very interesting space, because your domestic worker or Uber driver can also be registered as a sole proprietor, which can come as a business, right? Because they are not formally employed. At the same time, they are an informal worker also. So the universe is massive in terms of growth. But like I said, we are probably out of that 7 to 10 crore potential small businesses. Today, only have an idea of about 1 to 2 crore formalized businesses, which really have the details where government plus the private sector is really pushing. So we really, I would say, have still reached 10 to 20% of the segment, and there is a massive segment out there of small businesses in tier 3, tier 4, small towns, district level, village level, a village level vegetable vendor. How do you get that person formalized, right? I think that really and this misconception about GST, which is there, that you have to, I mean, without these, that people refrain from taking a GST number, right? But the more people, I mean, up to 20 lakh turnover, you don't really pay GST as a micro business. So these are small things of information, awareness, formalization, that I feel the which we sometimes feel are information doesn't matter. Why are you doing an awareness program? Why? But these are really the bedrock of getting people into these massive innovations that the country is building.
Yeah. No, I think the attitude towards some of this stuff is changing, right? I mean, because earlier formalization, meant that you would be hounded by the taxman, basically, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I mean, if you have some welfare attached to it, let's say loans or credit or whatever else, I think people might kind of look at it sort of differently as well. As you brought up in the previous answer as well, I think tech has been such a powerful lever for us, right? Whether we look at the Jandan, Aadhaar Mobile, the Trinity, or some of the other schemes as well, I think we're very tech first. We're very ahead of policy making in that sense. How do we take that forward, in terms of what else tech can do for us, right? In terms of innovation, and how have you seen this innovation really impact people? If you could give us some stories in terms of how someone went from an Aadhaar to what happened afterwards, that would be really nice.
Yeah, no, so I think the base of this is the Jam Trinity, which was laid in, I think, 10 years back and has been really implemented well since 2014, the Jandhan Aadhaar mobile combination, essentially. So if you look at the time period timeline of this, we basically looked at Aadhaar as a massive movement, which started in actually 2008-9 and then really picked up steam over the next 5-10 years. That was the base. It was meant to be an identity, national identity number. It has given innovators a massive, massive, not only in government but outside government, essentially a sense of who's where, what is their identity. Just to clarify again to the listeners, Aadhaar cannot be stored information. It doesn't actually tell you your caste or income or any such thing. It's just an identity number telling you that you're a citizen of the country and you belong to this state and your date of birth and just a unique identity, which now, because we are into the Aadhaar system, feels such a given. But imagine 20 years back for an innovator in India to try to do
Yeah.
something, just building a unique identity would be such a challenge. So I think that's the first part, and I'll share some examples of how this has worked. The second has been linking it to the mobile phones, the mobile revolution again in the last 10-15 years, which has happened in terms of moving from 2G, 3G, 4G, and the coming, I would really say, of players like Geo in the system. It has actually really revolutionized access of pocket size kind of internet access. You can buy daily internet. You can like get high access internet. This is again really empowering for people like us who have that ability to switch on our Wi-Fi's in metros. It again seems a very trivial thing, but somebody in a remote village being able to get 4G internet even for a day could be life changing in being able to get access to farm information or weather information or soil information just for a day in sowing season, as an example, right? This that could be absolutely like transformation in terms of how they look at the weather patterns and agriculture and sowing patterns. And the third, of course, which I think really started, which can be attributed completely to this current government in 2015-16, has been the Jandhan movement. I think before 2014 we had about 30-40% formal bank accounts. That has increased to now 86-90% people having bank accounts. Some of them, of course, we have heard criticism that they are not active, they're inactive, but the point is you still have bank
Hmm.
accounts. Activation can be done by, and that will happen as livelihoods grow, as more programs grow. But just to again map out people, and if we jog back our memory 6 years back, you will see, like if you look at articles and videos, you will see what a massive top down push banks had. Again, just the thinking of, like you said, right, like how the tax people are now a lot, I mean, it's become a little more friendly to
Yeah.
the businesses. Similarly, for the first time in our history, we had actually bank officials reaching out to citizens and saying, please open a bank account.
Yeah.
Like what probably our parents' generation and others have seen, where you really needed to get into a line to open a bank account or wait probably months to get a phone connection. We are now having with this Trinity. So that I think is really been the digital transformation. And I mean, there are. I mean, I'll give you an example of empowering in terms of information and digital. In a Palghar district in Maharashtra, which is a tribal district, there is a fantastic scheme which is run for tribal families. It's predominantly an ST dominated constituency, and there is a scheme for of kitchen garden for women who are pregnant. Idea is, apart from the monetary cash, they can also set up kitchen gardens with basically produce which can get their give them strength and kind of give them all the required nutrients. Now this kind of information could not have been mapped in the past without them being having an Aadhaar, their database, mapping them, identifying their caste, and then delivering the benefit. All of this has now become extremely seamless. So the kind of impact it can have on such a program can have on health and nutrition, ensuring that the children survive, ensuring that the children get nutrition, can be game changing. Similarly, benefits around udyog Aadhaar and getting access to formal credit, a difference of 8 to 14% of interest through government programs or mudra programs compared to the typical money lender interest rate of 27 to sometimes 30% interest, can be literally the survival difference for a small business. So all of these things have really happened with this, I would say, combination of Jandan Aadhaar and mobile. And then, of course, I would say in the last, again, 5, 6 years, the most game-changing bit of transformation digitally has been
Yeah.
UPI. The interesting fact to those say is that, we now, if I'm not wrong, monthly do 10 lakh crores worth of transactions under UPI. But the rural populations does only 6 to 7% of that, right? Urban population like you and me probably do 100 UPI transactions in a week. So that's how the numbers are there. So we still have a long way to go. And again, coming back to our earlier discussion point about assisted tech, last mile, we need still there's a long way to go. Imagine when another 500 million people start doing 10, 20, 30 transactions of UPI, the kind of, I mean, it's just the starting bit, and then linking them to other innovations. So I think those again, removing red tape, removing the unnecessary systems of going to government offices, these are things that the digital transformation has really
Yeah,
achieved.
I agree with you 100%. I think our first order of business was access. I think next we'll have to measure engagement, right? And then move, perhaps. I mean, sometime in our lifetimes, move beyond that to delight, perhaps, right? I mean, we'll have an NPS for various schemes and whatnot,
Government.
like how the
Yeah.
startups measure these things. So, with that background, let's talk about Haqdarshak. Why did you choose to found Haqdarshak? Was that something accidentally that happened, or you kind of stumbled your way into this, or was there some one moment that kind of inspired you to start on this journey?
So I'm born and brought up in Shimla and did my schooling there. Then, I mean, like every middle class family, had us, my parents basically said focus and get into the top colleges. So was able to figure out my way to SRCC. Did commerce there. Was not really interested in the subjects or in commerce. Was very clear, wanted to study policy and wanted to gain meaningful experience on the field in the community. So I was interested in this space from the beginning, but at that time, more from a academic sense, I didn't have very much experience on the real challenges of India. To be very honest, I was also coming from that kind of background, which is protected. We are the top 10% of the country, right, in terms of our rights and privileges. So you don't really see the real India. So around just after college, I decided to get some experience, and that's when in 2010 I joined the Teach for India Fellowship, and I taught students in a municipal low income school in Pune for 2 years, grade two. That inside the classroom was fantastic as an experience, great learning, great grounding, but also the kind of interactions I had with the parents of the students who are coming from extremely marginalized communities. Those 2 years were really transformational for me in terms of understanding the realities of, and this is in 10, 11, 12. So a lot of what we are talking about digital, what we have talked till now of the digital innovations were not really there. Even smartphone or internet access wasn't even for us that good, right? So it was a lot more challenging in terms of information. So around that time was when I was thinking of doing a policy course. I mean, most likely outside India. And again, after the 2 years experience, I realized that I know I want to work in the community a little bit more to understand, because still those 2 years really gave me a decent sense of urban poor and urban challenges. I wanted to spend some time in rural, so I worked in rural Maharashtra. I worked in again urban Delhi, rural Rajasthan in the next 2 years. In those 4 years, one common problem that I saw was that government had programs because I was trying to get some scholarship programs for my students, some housing program for the parents, livelihood options, and it existed. The challenge was people didn't know about it. There was nowhere that you can connect this entire ecosystem of information to the actual beneficiary. If you remember back then, even if we had to get I mean, you have to apply for an exam, you had to get a gazetted officer's signature. So we used to run as students to an SBI officer or a government officer, get that signature. So, I mean, for everything you had to kind of go to a physical office or a government office and things like that. So I found that quite, and parallelly the revolution was happening, right? The digital revolution, the not only in India, you could see it all over the world. People were coming on 4G, and we were talking about, I mean, things like Facebook, WhatsApp were exploding back then, and all those things. So my basic premise of starting Haqdarshak in 2014, which I started as a different name platform, was essentially to see that can we build a platform where people can know information, like a Wikipedia on schemes. Because there was literally no one single place where you can get access to even 100 schemes, leave alone 11,000. That was the starting point, and I had no intention of building an organization, service organization, or having execution. Idea was build a platform free to use. People log in there, get information. As I did that in 2014, I realized there is this massive gap, but it was only people like you and me who were coming to that platform in a small circle, right? Actually, the people who were on the ground couldn't access it because they didn't have internet, they didn't have phones, and the ones who really, like the 80-90% of India who really needed it. So that's around in 2015 when my kind of thought process transitioned, and I committed that next 10 years from 15 to 25 is where I really commit myself to this idea of Haqdarshak and getting people access not only of information but actual uh, benefit of their schemes, rights, in terms of social security and social protection. Even though the name is Haqdarshak, Haq being your rights and Darshak being in our condition is like more showing you the path. We are not a rights based organization. We are actually a service organization with the intent that how do we get ensure that people get access to all this last mile delivery, last mile information, documents, schemes, and all these services. So that's how the organization really kicked off. And like I said, from 15 back then, I had given myself whatever happens, and we I've seen multiple failures in the last 6-7 years in terms of building the organization. The commitment was always that how do you ensure that you stick to this. And also, if you look at it, we built an organization which has a tech platform, which has a research wing. We have a last mile delivery of trained on women entrepreneurs, but we haven't digressed from the path of social security. Unlike a lot of organizations, we have not gone into now selling loans or becoming an NBFC or getting into fintech, edtech. We are probably the organization which has only and only stuck to social security, and it has had its challenges, but that's how kind of Haqdarshak
Right.
came into be.
At the heart of Haqdarshak's service delivery are women, right? And you have a very interesting role for them. You talked about assisted technology, and they are the assisted part in the whole assisted tech platform that you have. Can you talk about a little more on that front and how you are empowering these women to um, be like community evangelists and so on?
So again, like when we started in 2015-16, the first phase of the company was to really build a platform. Um, Initially, we hadn't really thought that we'll exclusively work with women or women as the center of our solution. It came out organically, and initially we had tried to get all kinds of people to say that can you become agents, can you become these last mile partners for us. What we started realizing that if we really want to make an impact at the last mile sustainably, training women entrepreneurs is actually one of the best um, business plans or business decisions. Of course, it has its own challenges around patriarchy and women facing issues on getting access to smartphones or not getting sometimes permission from their families to work in rural areas. But still, I think the kind of last mile impact it makes, because they are very well connected in self-help groups and communities, so they are able to reach to those women who really need access to schemes. A lot of schemes related to health, education, All these which are centered around the women and children is something that they're able to push to the communities very well. They it gives them meaningful livelihood because they're still in their villages, still in their gram panchayats, but able to become these champions of change. So we've again faced a lot of challenges, but that's how the in about 16, 17 is when we decided that we want to focus on women entrepreneurs. So our model essentially is that we have this agent app which has all these schemes. We have digitized about 7,500. All our content is in local languages, so the women who work with us don't need to know English. They only need to know the local language of the particular state where they are in, and then they are the ones who go door to door and ask people these questions, and are able to tell them in real time that you're eligible for 30 schemes, 40 schemes, 50 schemes. These are the central government schemes, state schemes. These are the kind of documents you need, because a lot of demand from the communities is I need a birth certificate, I need a death certificate, I need a Aadhaar card, PAN card, because these without these documents you cannot get schemes. If I say I belong to a certain caste, I will have to prove that with a caste certificate, or if I belong to an income certificate, I'll need to get an income certificate. So we started using first the women on this information delivery uh, model, and then gradually also train them on how to also do the application of the last mile, so that they are not only providing information but they are also providing the last mile application support, which is form filling and getting them the benefits. And that's, I mean, over the last now 5 years we've trained about close to 25,000 women
Wow.
across 26 states. We largely work with grassroots partners, local state governments, and identifying these cadres. And it's a very simple training that we have. Um, like I said, again, a lot of challenges, but it's been absolutely, in a way, I mean, thrilling to see. I mean, coming from an urban background myself, to how ambitious um, our fellow citizens are. We sometimes undermine the fact that even they have commercial aspirations, they have entrepreneurial aspirations. We always try to think in this social angle, but for that women entrepreneur on the ground, it's all about how well can they earn, how much they can earn, because they want to aspirationally become better entrepreneurs. Some of our women have earned 17,000, 25, 40,000, got the first two-wheeler in the family. They've opened a shop. 40 of them have fought Gram Panchayat elections. Some of them have won. So I think those are some of the fantastic kind of stories, and mostly attributed to them. We've just been a catalyst, but it's just their personal grit, determination in very challenging circumstances to be able to do that.
Amazing. I'm kind of reminded of Sachiv ji from the series Panchayat. I think
Yeah.
you're creating many Sachiv jis in India, right? So, uh, you work very closely with the government and the bureaucracy on a daily basis. Again, it's not something that's kind of an obvious, intuitive, or a sexy choice for someone, right? I mean, because often the cliches of governments being very slow moving and not very innovative, and all of those things exist. What has been your experience of working with these agencies? What are some real constraints that they are dealing with that may not be obvious to us?
So I think firstly, just like information deficit is for people who want schemes, and also like for you and me without technology, I think they also face that information deficit as a government official, whether you are an IS officer or whether you are a block level officer or a Gram Panchayat level person. It is impossible for me to know from a social security angle how many schemes exist. So I also, as an officer, have that kind of information deficit. 90% of my time actually goes in admin work, paperwork. This meeting is happening, these minutes have to be done. It's a very cumbersome job. Intentionally, I would say more than 90% of government officials and even political representatives we have actually had a positive experience. People have been forthcoming. Of course, they have their own challenges of working with startups or companies, which exists, but it exists for everyone. And that, I think, we need things have changed and progressively improved, but it needs a lot more push. But the fact is, at a one-on-one individual level, when in the last 7, 8 years I've had conversations, 90% of my conversations have been encouraging. They have been kind of supportive in their own way, every such official. Especially at a senior level, you see that there is a lot more push on the social security side or livelihood side, a lot more push on solutions, thinking, ideation, trying, innovation. These are, whether even if they're buzzwords, at least people are talking about it all over the country. Some level of resistance happens at a very block or village level because you're trying to now undermine them in a way. You are trying to democratize information. So the boss of the area, the de facto kind of worker on the area who was monopolizing information, you're suddenly democratizing information. So whenever you democratize any information, then there is a resistance, who and the person who's affected the most is on the ground. So I think that those have been some of the experiences that I have had, and somehow it was to me very natural to work along with the government. We don't, I mean, it's an interesting relationship we have because we don't necessarily commercially work with the government, but we have a lot of collaboration with the government. And I think the key is this kind of collaboration, this kind of uh, partnership. And I think more and more, and I think why any organization, I would say, is successful working with local grassroots governments or any kind of governments, I feel is largely if they very clearly see that the person at the opposite end is transparent, authentic, there is no vested interest, there is no bias. These are things, if you have to work with the government, you have to show, because one of the cons of the government system in India is that there is no continuity. So if an IS officer is someone that you build a rapport over a year, chances are they'll get transferred. So then you have to start all over again.
Yeah.
It's not really a process in that sense. It's a very impersonal relationship. Or even if you build a rapport with a minister or an MP, 5 years down the line, there is a probability that person gets changed. Right? That's how democracy works. So you have to constantly ensure that your values, your principles, vision, mission is very unbiased, focused on the end vision and mission, and it has to be very authentic solutions. That's what I think for Haqdarshak has worked
Right.
in all our conversations.
So you've been on this journey for almost a decade now, and it's been transformational for you. We have a lot of young people listening to this podcast, and obviously they want to affect change. And I think some of the largest issues are beyond the cities, right? While you can solve for commute and all of these things within cities, I think outside of it there are greater, much more impactful problems to solve. For those people who are listening who want to do something about it, what is your advice in terms of going from wanting to do something to actually doing something?
I think the as much as possible, I would say, I mean, I'm only reflecting from my own experience of some of the people I've seen really being able to build organizations or do something which they're passionate about is spending time on the ground. It's a very probably cliched thing to say, or something that a lot of young people would have heard, but I think especially COVID has pushed us a lot online. We need to have physical in-person interactions as much as possible. I would really encourage that, because the reason why Haqdarshak started, or why I've been able to, even with a lot of challenges, all through, even right now, right, to run an organization and this kind of space is tough on a daily basis. My 4 or 5 years when I was between 20 to 25 of spending on the ground, really in different organizations, is what has shaped my next 7, 8, 10 years that are with Haqdarshak, right? So I would really say that I mean, there is this entrepreneurial wave in India, and it is going to continue for the next, I would say, 10 to 2, 3 decades for sure, the minimum, right? And there are millions of problems out there, and there are some bright young minds who can solve them. But you won't be able to solve them by just watching something, listening to something that can trigger
Yeah.
a passion. But if you really want to, like you said, right, you have to get out to the 80% India, the 70% India, which can be transformational. And everyone doesn't need to start something. You could play a massive role in joining something which aligns to your mission and vision. But to find that passion, I would really say go on the ground, get on the ground, meet people, understand the challenges they have. It will be surprised the kind of richness of information, richness of kind of knowledge and kind of experiences that can provide. And like I said, especially after COVID, I would encourage the young listeners to kind of really make that effort.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, because I don't think some of these deeper challenges can be solved from an arm's distance, right? You have to
Yeah.
get hands on with things. We call this series the Long India series, where we talk to people who are optimistic about India and also doing something about it, right? Striving for a better future. And the last question we ask in this series is basically, what are you optimistic about India for? What drives that optimism?
I mean, we've been calling this next 25 years as the the golden period that is going to come for India, the 75th independence year to the 100th one. This is what we all calling it. And I think I'm most optimistic about our demographic dividend. I think I'm most optimistic about the fact that almost 70-80% of the country is below 30. Our average age is 26, 27 years old age, which gives us a massive
Yeah.
advantage in the world. Of course, it brings with it the challenges of skilling, digitization. We need to keep up, but I think I'd rather have those challenges with the demographic dividend than not have not have this
Yeah.
youth, because I think
Workable challenges, basically.
workable challenges, and these are things that can be solved if we put our heads together and do this well. So I think that's really what I'm optimistic about, because it means we are, by the time, we will be the engine of the world in all sense, whether it's manufacturing, whether it is IT, which I think we already are, looking at the all the CEOs of the big companies in the world, and even in fintech, or whether it is in social impact areas. I think you go to any platform across the world. I've been to most of these platforms in Europe, US, Australia, Africa, and you'll find Indian organizations driving even impact work, and they're winning awards and winning innovations. So that's what I'm really optimistic about, and I feel like uh, as we are able to kind of provide good information, very kind of in a very democratic way, and we are able to connect a lot more of this youth into the real problems of our country and the world. I think sky is really the limit. We could really, like I said, be at the engine of everything in the world in the next 25 years.
That's a great note to end the podcast on. I think what I am most optimistic about is that we have people like you, right, who are striving to make a difference. And I think, yeah, I mean, the amount of talent that India has is mind-boggling, right? So thank you again, Aniket. This was a really nice chat, and all the best with everything that you have coming up.
Thanks a lot, Roshan. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Bharatvaarta podcast. If you want to see more content like this, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We started Bharatvaarta to facilitate long form discussions on politics, policy, and culture. We don't necessarily endorse anything that was said in this episode. If you wish to offer us feedback, do reach out to us on social media. We are at Bharatvaarta on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You could also get in touch with us on our website www.bharatvarta.in. The links are in the description below. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.